Hello and welcome to News Click. Today we have with us Subhashini Ali to discuss 100 years of Women's Day. Subhashini, good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
100 years of Women's Day. Can you tell us a little bit how it started? Because it did start as a Working Women's Day initially, right?
No, what's really amazing and maybe sometimes a bit disheartening is that all the issues around which International Women's Day started and there was a need felt to have such a day, actually they're all still very much outstanding issues, and they are still the main issues of the women's movement everywhere. There was a big strike of women garment workers in America and in New York, and they had they had a very strong union, but they had of course very low wages and very long working hours. These women really faced a lot of brutality, but what was very interesting is the tremendous range of sympathy that they were able to elicit. So they had large numbers of women organizing solidarity movements, collections for their children, for them, and so on, all over America. And it also resonated very strongly with what was known as either socialist movement or democratic socialist movement in Europe. And at that time, Clara Zetkin was the leading woman figure of the socialist movement and later on the communist movement in Europe. She was a German, and she had been one of the founders of the Spartacus Party, which became the Communist Party along with Rosa Luxemburg and Liebknecht. And she was a person who continuously struggled to make questions of gender, justice and equality important on the agenda of socialist parties and the socialist movement. So in solidarity with this strike in America, Clara Zetkin and others also organized many protest movements. They also faced a lot of repression and attacks, and this continued for the next 1 or 2 years. And then they decided to observe this day every year as International Women's Day, but it was not restricted to not only working women's demands, but there were also demands like for the right to vote, because there was a big controversy that this is a sort of a bourgeois demand or a very reformist demand. So even the left did not automatically support this demand. The women had to fight a very long battle to say that, extension of democracy was very important for the working class movement also. So therefore they should adopt this demand as a left demand also. So that was one very big struggle that they waged. So it was the rights of women workers, right of women to vote, and other democratic rights of women. So I think that at that particular time, this particular issue of violence against women was somehow not something that they took up in a very big way at that time. That came later on, and then of course that became a very, very important part of women's movements and a very important demand. So that is where it started 100 years ago, and we can see that we still haven't really moved as much as we should have in 100 years.
So actually there is an attempt also to make the Women's Day today appear as if it's like Mother's Day, Father's Day. The issue is more as if it's an individual women's issue, but the relation of the Women's Day to really the fight of the women's movement, that link to the movement is sought to be currently sort of obfuscated or put in the shade. Do you think that's actually a bourgeois transformation, or a transformation in way the people would like to, or certain kinds of forces would like to see the women's movement?
Well, certainly I think there are two aspects to this whole attempt. One is of course that because International Women's Day has got such a intrinsic link with the working class movement, so obviously governments, the bourgeoisie would like to kind of dilute the whole thing and make it a very sugary and sweet sort of a thing, and just keep it limited to things that they can accept very easily. Actually, they don't even accept those things. that are propagated on that day, but it sounds as if they are making a lot of concessions to women's demands by sort of having this word bandied about, especially empowerment, which is a really most terrible and misleading word. Because it's not empowerment that women need. It's not that they lack any kind of power or strength. It's just that they need equality. They need proper laws. They need an environment in which laws are implemented, where their security is guaranteed, where employment is guaranteed. I always give this example that if you just see what the metro has done to women living in old Delhi, when you think of them as being living in seclusion, not allowed to go anywhere, but if you provide reasonably decent, safe transportation at some affordable price, you'll see women coming out of old Delhi and burqas and all that and having picnics at in the middle of Janpat or in Connaught Place, So what is being done with Women's Day is to try and take out the struggle and take out the aspect that social transformation is necessary for women's emancipation, and also the question of women workers, the exploitation of workers and the working class. So that's why it's made into this sugary and sweet thing, dealing with empowerment and honoring certain women who have done something, whether they are successful entrepreneurs or some maybe a panchayat member, which is very, I mean, it's not that we are belittling their achievement, but trying to again pull it away from the social sphere into a very individual and personal sort of a thing of achievement, and therefore saying that it is possible within the existing system of exploitation and the system of the economy that exists. Within that, it is possible for women to achieve emancipation, which is absolutely not true and not correct. So that's one part to it. And then, of course, like every other day, there's a commercial aspect. So then there'll be, sort of a whole lot of selling that's done.
Merchandising
like of all sorts of cards and SMSs and etc. etc. So then basically the word I would like to use is totally inappropriate. It's like emasculating, but what I'm trying to say, it's taking the fight, the struggle and the real essence of what Women's Day is all about and making it palatable, and also pretending that the demands of Women's Day are achievable without a transformation of society.
So actually there's one issue that is a little sensitive in this context, that if you really look at women's issues, one of the issues also what happens to the women inside the family, in the sense that family as an institution is also oppressive, it's patriarchal, and particularly in societies like India, take the Khap Panchayats recently. It's also an attempt to control sexuality of women and so on. So in this sense, this aspect of women's struggle, in fact, transcends the issue of class as well. This is one aspect. Do you think it's also something?
I think that now this is something that is being addressed more and more. And I think that an organization like All India Democratic Women's Association also, while in the early years, formative years, where it started at the time of the national movement. So that's a very good thing, because the larger perspective, the social perspective has never been lost. So, and that linkage of women's emancipation with emancipation of society or freedom for a whole country, that was established very strongly right then, and that linkage can never be given up or weakened. But along with that, the whole nature of the family as a real center of oppression and as a perpetuator of patriarchy, inequality, and actually, of course, if you've read Engels starts by saying that the first class struggle can be seen within the family, within the patriarchal family itself. So so much of what we are fighting in society actually are present in the family setup as it exists today. So I think there's more and more appreciation of this, and this fight for democratization of the family, and the fight against the feeling that, well, a family is a private sphere. That is not where laws should enter. That is not where police should enter. That is not where struggles should be situated. I think that has been really given up. And I think more and more large numbers of women who, also belong to conservative sections of society, more and more of them are also coming to realize and accept. So this demand to change the nature of family, the rules by which families are governed. What is family property all about? Post-matrimonial property rights for women, etc., etc. These have become very important questions today. And of course, the issue of violence within the family, which is not only the wives, but also, daughters, sisters, so mothers. So this, I think, has become extremely important now.
In fact, one of the things which I think earlier generations never really talked about was violence within the family.
Yeah.
And I think this is something which has emerged much more clearly now. We are seeing, of course, the worst forms of it in Haryana, the Khat Panchayats, but honor killings. But this is something which is really a continuation of much older oppression that women have suffered earlier, more silently perhaps.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I mean, not interesting, but the thing to note is that it's not only the marital home, it's also in natal homes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this aspect is now being spoken about much more and thought about much more. Previously, it was the best kept secret in society, I think, that the home was this very, very safe place for daughters and mothers and wives, whereas actually probably it's the most unsafe place, because it's also the place where you can't ask for any kind of help. It's a very closed situation where it's not possible to reach out to any outside agency for any kind of help.
In fact, if you really look at the studies and research done, it would show that most women have suffered at the hands of close family members or very close friends of the family.
Yeah.
So again, it's really
from childhood onwards, That's why I said natal home and marital home, both of them are great sites of violence for women.
What do you think of the future, next 10, 15 years?
See, one thing that I do feel is that a lot of the illusions about globalization are now, are not as strongly held as before. A lot of the inequality that is being created is now being more and more recognized, and also a lot of linkages are being made. For example, I think that very, very many more women today understand that the fact that they don't have a ration card or they're not able to get subsidized ration is very closely connected with the policies of neoliberalism and globalization. So connections between problems of poor women or problems of unemployed women, problems of working women, along with the larger neoliberal paradigm, I think those connections are being made much more strongly. And therefore, I think that certainly we are going to be witnessing very, very big struggles in the very near future. But the problem is that there are many forces and very conscious forces that are really, going all out to see that these struggles don't happen. Of course, there are the divisive things like identity politics, caste, communalism, all these things. But there's also the media. The media has now become a much more autonomous sort of weapon of the status quo and of exploitation and oppression. And the media, number one, by kind of completely writing off or belittling politics, ideology, struggle, the idea that things can change, has created a huge constituency for all these sort of ideas. There's a very large number of, I think, young people and maybe young educated people who have always historically played a very important role in spearheading struggles for change. There's a lot of cynicism among them and a lot of denial of the fact that anything can change or that ideology is relevant at all today. But at the same time, you just start believing that this is a really, very universal situation when Egypt explodes and, things start happening in different parts of the world. So then you realize that the reality of people's lives is always militating against this kind of actual ideological warfare against ideologies of struggle. So these are very big problems. The other thing is that what people really forget when people say, well, why aren't you all out on the streets, is that today women are under so much pressure to earn to keep their families going. And they're doing like, 20 different things. They're home-based workers, they're domestic workers. They just have to spend so much time in earning very little money that actually I know that even activists who used to say give 1 hour or 2 hours in a month or in 2 months to demonstrations, to large meetings, today they have to keep weighing it against the kind of income loss that this is going to result in. And then the cost of transport has become just so astronomical. So there are these very real breaks on the movement. But of course, when people are determined to change things, then these things don't stop them either. And I really think we are going to be seeing very big movements very soon.
Thank you, Subhashini. Hope to have you with us when those movements take place soon.
Hope so too.